Mi ćemo samo uvodi. Dobar dan svima. Ja sam Nina, iako mislim da se svi sad već znamo. Bliže. Htjela bih vas pozdraviti ispred SPID-a, Saveza scenarista i pisaca izvedbenih dijela, jednog od organizatora programa Kritička dramaturgija. Kritička dramaturgija je program koji nastaje u suradnji SPID-a i Kurziva, o čemu će više Hana reći. Do sad smo imali već radne grupe na teme recikliranog filma i feminističke dramaturgije i ovo je drugi javni događaj koji imamo, dakle predstavljanje knjige Ane Dubljević i trenutno radimo u radnoj grupi o kolaborativnoj kritici. Imamo sutra događanje u Buksi na kojem sudjeluju kolektiv Critical Interruptions, Kulturpunktov kritičarski kvadrilog koji čine Jasna Žmak, Una Bauer, Goran Pavlić i Agata Juniku, a moderirat će Hana iz Kurziva. Tako da... dajemo ovaj uvod na hrvatskom, ali predstavljanje će se odviti na engleskom, tako da evo samo to da napomenem. To je to, evo, hoćeš ti.
Bog svima, ja sam vas isto samo htjela pozdraviti u ime Kulturpunkta, odnosno Kurziva, i reći da je ovo događanje s naše strane dio dugogodišnjeg programa koji je posvećen razvoju kritike i kritičkog mišljenja u zemljama bivše Jugoslavije. I da smo super sretni i uzbuđeni što smo doveli Anu Dubljević, koja će pričati o svojoj zanimljivoj i važnoj knjizi. I također što je ovdje Pia Brezavšček iz Maske, inače našeg jedna od organizacija s kojom surađujemo baš na tom programu posvećenom kritici. I Ana Fazekaš, naša jako draga i bliska suradnica, kritičarka, teoretičarka. Sad ću vas prepustiti Ani.
Hvala, hvala što ste me zvali, baš sam jako sretna da se družimo u ovom postavu. Ja ću isto sad malo na hrvatskom brbljati, onda prelazimo na engleski. Znači, našli smo se da pričamo o knjizi Feministički porno pejzaži Ane Dubljević, inače rezultat njezinog MA istraživanja. Riječ je o bilingvalnom izdanju na srpskom i engleskom jeziku i otvorit ćemo sad niz tema koje se provlači kroz tu zapravo jako fascinantnu knjigu koja ne samo da polazi od prakse, nego ostaje u praksi uvelike. I zapravo čini jedno unikatno izdanje koje značajno obogaćuje naše nekakvo i regionalno, i mislim šire nego regionalno područje publikacije koje se bave izvedbom i izvedbenim praksama. Znači sad ću se prebaciti na engleski i pitat ću Anu da mi da svoju vlastitu description of the book and its topics. A što budem nervoznija, to ću više gledati u papir. With a few introductory maybe words about both you and your work progress, the process of working on the book. I'm mostly interested in how you managed to keep it practice-based and keep the processual nature of the book while working on writing it, and why was it important for you to write it as a book and publish it as a book?
Okay, there was a lot of questions. Yeah, first of all, thanks a lot for having me here. Amazing organization and initiative from Nina and Hana, and thank you too for joining me here. I would never ever do this by myself. So back to the question. I don't think I would ever do this if I wouldn't have this structural support from my master's in choreography and performance, where I was obliged to do kind of masterpiece, which was this still to come, a Feminist Pornscape performance that I did with 5 more colleagues of mine, some of them actually Zrinka Užbinec, the artist that is from Zagreb, you might know, and for more. So we did the piece in 2017, and it was really an investigation on a topic that we were all kind of fascinated by completely in this time. It was, I think, 2016 when we discovered this whole field of feminist pornography, and I think personally, but also in a professional kind of artistic interest, we were really kind of fascinated by this field exists and what it all brings. So we were kind of really wondering how the practice of feminist pornography could actually influence the choreography or making or thinking about choreography and dance on many levels, I would say, from the way that this industry was practicing their own making was quite close to, I think, what this kind of small niche of experimental choreography that we, I think, kind of practiced was really close to what to the thoughts and ideas that we wanted to practice, like ethics of work and conditions of work, and but also on the level of the dramaturgy of the feminist porn movie itself, and how this could bring us to understanding a different way of stage dramaturgy to dance and choreography. So based on all of this, I was also 2 years later, I decided to make the reflection on it anyhow as a part of my master, and it was quite weird actually to understand how to do it. It was complex in a sense that I was really interested in this term of feminist dramaturgy that was all over the place. Like everybody was saying this term and putting it on the table as if we all understand what it is, but there was no real discussions, or I wasn't a part of them, where people would actually elaborate on what it is for them. I think it was mostly kind of used for a stage dramaturgy to describe something that was equal to kind of non-peak dramaturgy, or like a flat stage dramaturgy, or something like that. So people would go and see a piece, and then when talking about it, they would say, feminist dramaturgy, you know. So you could understand that there's no kind of like short introduction and then a peak moment, and then and that was really kind of in a relation to a feminist porn movies that we were watching, which were dealing with much of a different kind of dramaturgical elements inside of it. So I made this thing of trying to understand what from our practice could help me understand what for me is feminist dramaturgy, or could be somehow. But writing about it was difficult because somehow I didn't understand how can I give myself a permission to, I didn't want to kind of like state that I know what it is, and I still don't. And then realizing that it's just fine to also go through your own practice and offer this through a book as sharing of some ideas that you have been working with was really liberating, I think.
I'd like to we'll come to Pia in a moment. I just really wanted to no, I will not stop you, but I just wanted to say that I'm also interested in what you got out of the process of writing the book itself, because I feel like you've both developed a kind of protocol that you can put into place that people can share with and participate in, as well as like capture something that like is a moment, not just not just in kind of like this, not just in the field of dance, but like also in theory. There is something that we could call, I think, non-peak theory, and maybe attempts to kind of write more corporally, more bodily, more endlessly, more sensually. And I think that you coming from the field of dance, of body-based practice, of performance art, you actually, and communicating very vividly, very actively with theory, you've actually managed to make some kind of bridge between these practices being developed in the field of theory itself and in the practice of dance. And we've talked about how rarely it is that practitioners write about their practice and fixate their thoughts and processes, and how much time it takes, how much energy it consumes. And I think that this book is somehow it dokazuje naprosto da koliko je važno da se na taj način isto piše i da practitioners isto develop their own writing practice, and this is like a monument to this kind of crossover.
Yeah, we were talking about how I think around from 2010s, I think there was a variety of, especially from Croatia and Slovenia. I remember reading a lot of essays from practitioners. I had a feeling that there was a writing practice and publishing practice around that, and somehow I don't know why. Is it because I don't have information from this side, but I don't see it so much anymore. But for me, it was really some kind of a discovery. I don't know. I never had a developed writing practice. I was trying a little bit. It was always super difficult for me. But then putting myself into this challenge, I really got to understand how not only that it became some kind of a self-reflective process, but it also got to be a generator of new ideas somehow. And then I was really triggered by this idea that I can start from a practice and then have a kind of a messy relation to theory and allow myself to do it, which might lead to also, I don't know, to theoretical disaster completely. But then I was willing to take this risk and then understand how it also can go back to the practice. And this is what really excited me somehow. So it was an intense process. I admire people who have the discipline to sit and write. I really admire this. And then, yeah, being committed to a topic and the research where not so much is there written before. Somehow it's, yeah, but it's super interesting. I don't know. You wanna? No? Good. Yeah, these are awkward.
Sorry, yeah. To shift the focus to Pia, I'd like to talk first off about your first contact with Feminist Pornscapes and whether you've encountered Ana's practice beforehand, and also talking from a position of a person who is a theorist and an editor. What were your thoughts and feelings and experiences in contact with this book?
Well, this book came to me in two different ways, from two different directions. First, Alia Lubnik, who was discussing, which was then my co-editor of the Maska Journal, and now she's the director of Maska. But she was discussing with Ana about maybe publishing some of these materials in Maska, but then we put it down a bit because we didn't have an issue that would really, where this would fit in. So we put it on ice, and then from different direction, actually from Bojana Kunst, also there was this initiative that this would be great to publish in Maska. Bojana Kunst was also Anna's mentor in Gießen. So we had then this great material that we really wanted to publish, but we didn't still have this context. But then we decided to put it in the issue of the voice of dance, which is this issue of Maska, like it's from last year. And yeah, it's an interesting editorial process how we came to that, because we figured that also the feminist dramaturgy is something that needed its voice. So it fitted in a bit more metaphorically, because in the issue we are discussing, of course, the intersection of the voice and the dancing body and all the issues that come with that. But with this text, it was, of course, a bit more like metaphorically, but still I think that it fits really nicely, because we have a text on dramaturgy, like dramaturgy more generally by Guy Kuhls, and I think that something was really missing, because he's doing like this review of what has been said about dramaturgy, like in some period of time where this the dramaturgy was really considered in theory as something that's invisible, as something that is like in the intersection between inside and the outside, between the performance and the outside of the performance, and it was a position that was actually vocalizing and arguing about what the piece is about. So it's some kind of I think great topic to put also these principles that Ana developed through her practice inside as an addition to this, like more what we know about dramaturgy. I think that the feminist principles are still to come. So they are still something that we need to develop, I think, because I don't know, I consider myself a dramaturg and also a feminist, but I still don't know what feminist dramaturgy is or can be. So I think it's a really nice question that comes in, and we wanted to put it in the forefront also, like metaphorically, in this issue. But you asked me also if I came across Ana's practice from the practical side of view. Actually, I didn't see this performance, still to come. I saw some other performances before by Ana and her collaborators. But I think that reading this book, you know, it's really a very special way of entering also the performance itself. And I kind of liked it that I didn't see it. And I really... it was as if we were in the process with you, you know. It was not just witnessing this, the event that came out, but it was more than that. So I think it was a really precious way of entering your practice.
Yes, I completely agree, because I also hadn't had the chance to see Still to Come. I think you had only one performance in Zagreb at one point, and you should do it again. But I've read about it, and then I read the book about it, and I felt I could visualize a lot of it and probably make up a lot of it also. But there is something beautiful about that kind of writing about dance, and that kind of writing about performance art that doesn't describe from outside, it describes from inside, and it really welcomes you into the process of making it, into the sensuality of it. And you managed to do that, like using a language that I hope we'll hear if you'll be willing to read an excerpt at some point.
We didn't.
You you find the next, okay. But my next question, maybe for Pia, would be then regarding feminist dramaturgy, and not trying to find a definition. And I think that it would be completely counterproductive to try, and like missing the point in many ways. But I would like to think about how what I feel is most interesting practices and theories in the past years that had like feminist or feminism as some kind of prefix actually are focused more on the practice itself, about the conditions of labor within an environment, as feminism as a resource of knowledge and experience, and a sort of politically self-conscious methodology that somehow guides and informs and restructures and structures practice, more than something that tries to find feminism as content, as motive, as topic. I'd like you to comment maybe on that kind of like shift of focus. Do you think it's valid? Where have you encountered it, and what kind of potential do you see in it?
Well, I think that this is exactly the way we should encounter feminist dramaturgy. Well, not through topics that performances deal with, maybe also, but not so much. I think that the real potential is in the micropolitics of making the performance, of the environment we create when we're making. And I think that we still have a lot of work to do here. I don't know. I have this feeling. Of course, there are different practices. Some are really dealing with that, and not so dealing with the way that things get represented, but are really emerged and really they research the ways of being together. I think that it's important that we find out what these feminist dramaturgies are, because I think it's not only about performance art. I think it's really about every relation, you know. And I think that here is a beautiful playground where we can, in conditions that can be a bit more safe, or maybe can be a bit more experimental, and maybe some time is reserved for that, because in life it's not always so. I think that this is what makes it great. Well, this concept of feminist dramaturgies, I think. Yeah.
I have a weird memory. Just I don't know if this is any. I just wanna put it there. I was invited in Belgrade to be a part of some kind of a conference. It was called something like a witch. I don't know. Summoning witch something, and there was on one table there were activists, like let's say very experienced Belgrade activists, women, and then on the other table it was kind of us, younger generation of artists. And then I was invited to tell a bit about the piece that a colleague, Tanja Šljivar, made, and a little bit related to feminist dramaturgies. And then we had this weird situation where these women were, for example, like for half an hour talking about real issues, like working with women in Kosovo, and statistics about rape and death and health, domestic violence. And then 5 minutes later, it was us artists trying to talk about feminist dramaturgies on the piece, and it felt really weird. I felt really kind of like, you know, I don't know. I felt kind of like really questioning like what is needed, you know, how do we navigate all this shift that we want to make it more about how we work, but also can we forget about the kind of like real lives and structural changes that need to be done in order to also go on practicing what we want to practice. So I feel that both are really needed. I think that I mean, when talking about the shift that you were commenting on, definitely I don't think that the feminism in art should stay on the content level. And then under it have all of different fuck ups, and I think that this happens. But I also think that art can work through different means and communicate in more poetical or different political ways what maybe activism can still kind of push. I think it's needed. I have no clue why I said this, but
yeah. Maybe I would just like to mention the new book by Bojana Kunst again, because she's exactly talking about these paradoxes, also the limits of art when it comes to the notion of care, and how this can also be just ways that we're perpetuating things the way they are, but just a little bit better, she says. So I think that these problems are really important to discuss, so that we don't just romanticize art as some kind of oasis for relations and then there's life, you know, but how to connect the two and bring out the paradoxes and the real questions that come with it.
I don't know, I feel like it's really difficult to juxtapose these things and try to try to make peace with them. They're different, and they're at the same time they're the same, and both are important. And we really need art, and we really need to talk about this, and we really need to have these safe spaces. And it's also a matter of life and death as much as explicit violence is. Both are as important as the other, but I would like to somehow make this conversation maybe a little bit more specific and ask you about what we maybe that's not making it more specific, but I would like to talk about why we should or shouldn't, or why you insist on, or if you insist on calling feminist dramaturgy feminist, and what feminism means to you, why you use the term still, although we know that feminism, especially as in as much as it was present as content-wise, it was commodified in mass and pop culture. We know that feminist theory within academia is very elitist and discriminatory. We know the ways that contemporary feminism is rooted in perpetuating gender binarisms and engages in really sinister practices of alienating and discriminating against non-normative bodies and gender non-binary people. So how do you make it work? Why do you think we should, if you think we should, insist upon sticking with feminism instead of shifting terminology or thinking otherwise?
Okay, I think it's really important to stick with feminism. I think it's not just another ism to stick to this variety of identities, maybe, because feminism is really, I think, at least radical feminism, if not liberal feminism, is really explaining the world to us, I think. And I think this is really important because it's showing us that actually another world is possible, I think, because if we are just sticking to the world as it is, and we are seeing like individualities and different problems that they have as something particular, it's I think we can't change it, you know, but I think that it's really important to see this intergender relations also structurally and historically and so on. And by that, I think that we can see that, well, it's just one interpretation of relations, you know. It's not, these are not the relations that we have to live and that we have to submerge to. And I really don't see like some kind of only a victim position to this, but I really see the strength in it, you know. I see it as a position from which it's possible to do some changes, or at least to dream another world. Yeah.
I definitely agree. But there is a question, like, I do ask myself if me as a kind of dance performance maker, do I want to label my art always and only as a feminist? There is a question for me. I also want to have this privilege of, you know, like white cis male artists who don't have a label on their art. Like, it's, you know, because I can understand that, I mean, I wouldn't change the ways I work, and I will develop it on the feminist lines, that's definitely it, but I also don't know if it's kind of putting my art also in some kind of a box, and then this box has a particular audience and then stays there somehow. So I do question whether it is kind of like two ways of understanding how to. I mean, for example, I don't know if I'm going to say a secret now, but I do understand, for example, your decision to not call the whole conference a feminist dramaturgical, feminist dramaturgy, but critical dramaturgy. And this shift I do understand, you know. And then how. But I think it's really about understanding what context, what situation really needs, and then act upon what is the reality of the specific situation, and where it really needs to be stressed, or where it is really. I think that's for the outside, but for the inside, in my processes, it really helps me understand from which keys to work. And I don't think that's a receipt that everybody should take, definitely not. And but I am willing to share it. And if this is helpful for others, that's amazing. And I would love to have more experiences from other people who think in the same way, so we can kind of merge and develop further.
I don't know, I feel like it's when I heard feminist dramaturgy for the first time as a term used, it felt really exciting, but I also felt like I haven't felt excited about something called feminist in some time, and looking at my own kind of like development as a thinker, I felt like feminism was very important for me as a developmental stage, but I also feel that I've become dissociated somehow with it, or dissociated from it. But at the same time, I feel like reading your book or engaging with people who try to think through feminism in different ways, there is something to it when we think of feminism with all of its messy and just plain bad traditions, like the ways we've failed and the ways are the people that came before us, as much as we're grateful, they have failed. They left traces that are not positive, they're not affirming, and there is something to sticking with feminism, just to acknowledge that we'll probably make some mistakes ourselves, and that it's not perfect, and that we have to somehow engage with what has been done and what has been happening, and the discriminatory practices that came from feminism, and all the wrong, svi pogrešni smjerovi u kojima smo krenuli, sva skretanja koja su se desila putem. But also to try to again make this conversation more specific, and not to da ne leluja toliko oko abstraktnih termina. I'd like to talk about the specific things that you really try to embody in your practice. Like, how do you make sure that you give it your best attempt for it to be feminist, to keep the micropolitics somehow ethical? Especially maybe if this is something that you find inspiring. I myself was very inspired by talking to Nina Gojić about the project she did with Ana Dubljević and Marta Kresić, who have made a wonderful piece dealing, amongst other things, with the topic of consent. And we talked about the book they read called Tomorrow Sex Will Be Good Again, which is a great book on the multifaceted nature of consent and its tradition, which I also think kind of engages with topics Pia has written about and talked about, the ethics of care and the dynamics of care. So how do we take care of each other? How do we deal with consent in interpersonal relationships, in a professional environment that is also always very intimate, also very intense? So what do you do, like, specifically? How do you make sure you're doing the best you can?
I don't know. I think that's the first and only answer. And yeah, I think it's really just a practice that you allow yourself every day to not know and to fail, and to ask how to do it. And yeah, I guess it's also just like common sense, or like basic need, like human needs to, I don't know, care for yourself and care for the other, and then being okay with not knowing how to do that. So,
but I mean,
yeah.
How do we learn the basics? Because I feel like we forget them very easily. It should be straightforward. Like, I'm sure you actually know what to say. I'm sure that all the people who were in your working group for the past few days know that you must have some kind of practice. So I guess you talk, you engage, you make sure that others feel comfortable, and these things should be basic. But they're really not.
Yeah. I get it. I don't know. When I'm talking to people from the dance and performing arts field, I have a feeling that we all do it, and that it's very common for us. That when I'm saying this stuff, that everybody's like, yeah, of course. I mean, but then, yeah, realizing that this is not a given, of course. I don't know. Maybe I can talk a little bit more concrete from, for example, from the practice of the pornscapes. We had this, I think there is an intention to also make from these kind of thoughts, like how to put it in the practice, and actually kind of like make rituals out of it. Like we had this a circle of, we called it a check-in, and this is something that I usually practice in whatever I do, that we take some time that everybody says how they feel in the process. So, and it's a space where nobody really comments on it. You just say whatever you think it needs to be said. You don't need to explain anything. You can just say even just to name the emotions that you have that day, or if you have a need to actually address a problematic question in the in the relations. And that was happening every day in the middle of every rehearsal, the second part. And I think this really allowed the somehow the space to really talk about emotions, but not in a way that you talk about them when you go after rehearsal for a beer and maybe somebody says something, and then you have to really figure out if this is actually happening or not, or should I go there or not. But more like having a structural basis for things to appear and letting it appear. That kind of stuff, I think that there's the intention to, ask about at every rehearsal, like, is there specific needs that you have today? Like, oh, I cannot sit for more than an hour. Cool, let's find a way to deal with it. Or being intentional. I think that was the just being intentional in finding practical ways of how to do these things. And I'm sure all these people have them already, and it would be just wonderful if we could all share it. I think that we would so much benefit of everything like that. And there's always to learn. Yeah. How do you do it?
Yeah, I think that this is exactly what's really important, because things are not self-evident. And that you have some kind of procedures which allow us to deal with problems that anyway come out, you know, in any collaboration, in any social situation. If people hang out a long time, there are certain things that are maybe something gets stuck. There's some emotional issues, or there's something. So I think it's really important to have this space, because I think that it's not self-evident at all. And also you talked about consent before, and we also had this controversies in the academy like 2 years ago, when there was sexual harassment with one student professor who harassed her. And I think that because it's so we think that it's so self-evident that this is like some kind of art environment where everybody is open and can discuss everything always with everybody, and the hierarchies are loose, and and the transfers are complicated, but that it's normal also to have this kind of transferal situations with professor, and it's different than in different fields, but there was no structural agency where you could go and report something like that, or and of course then we heard that these things are been happening for ages, and it's kind of a structure in itself, but no one was talking about it. So I think it's really important, because exactly in this closeness, the care is closeness, and of course there is violence. There can be violence in this closeness, because it's something that's not public anymore. It gets private, it gets pushed into privacy, and this is invisibility then. And I think that it's really important that we have some mechanisms where this public visibility, or some instances where this can get public if there's lack of consent, if there's problems that come in these relationships. So I think that yes, on one hand, these artistic practices are developing ways how we can deal with that, but also a lot of things are exactly in these situations, not talked about, and they are somewhere behind our backs. You know, we push them aside. We say this is normal for this kind of environment. We know how it goes also with the different authors and what things happened. And for a long time, people thought it was normal, you know. But when some people started to talk about it, then other people realized that maybe this is not normal. And I think that also this is why we need feminism still, you know, to make things that we think that are normal and self-evident, that we can see that maybe they are not, and to develop some strategies to deal with it.
But I also kind of feel like there is something to be said about the unclear nature of something that is something like consent. Like what Catherine Angel's book, Tomorrow Sex Will Be Good Again, talks about, amongst other things, is the fact that we don't always know, and we can't be driven to make a decision between the binaries of yes and no, and we're not always free to communicate completely what we want, and just opening a space to talk is not enough, and sometimes it's almost too much. And sometimes, like, those practices that are so present among the artistic community and dance artists and bodily based artists, like talking, like sharing, sometimes it feels like violence to me. Like, if you're not that person, sometimes it feels invasive. So how and you maybe you want to do it, but you don't really feel completely comfortable, and then someone's asking you, how are you? And that can be really traumatic. So I feel like also all of these terms that we're talking about and that we're circling around are very ambivalent and very slippery, and something that we really need to come back to each and every time again. And that's something also that I feel is very great about your book, and the way it captures this openness and processuality, and the way it never attempts to give a final answer. So maybe now you can read something from the book so we hear the prose.
No, yeah, I wanted to just comment on this, that I'm coming from a very kind of spoiled place, you know. I work only with people that I really that I adore, you know. I choose to work only in these kind of relations where I really know that we sense each other, and that I believe that my problems, like the stuff that kind of like drives me, that we share same problems in this way, and then it's really difficult to also then this is not a guidebook, you know. This is not like I'm not sharing advices to. I also have a lot to learn in relation to processes where there is disability, where there is all different kinds of things to learn, how to approach, how to deal, how to care with. Yeah, so yeah, crazy. I don't know what I want to read. But yeah, maybe I can read this. Yeah, you mentioned tantric dramaturgy. Maybe I can read it because it's very short, so you won't lose so much patience. But it's also because it's, I think, very provocative in a sense. Or I think it is claiming this can provoke stuff, I think. Anyhow, I think, yeah. The thing before that is happening in the book is that I analyze a model of landscape dramaturgy that Ana Vujanović kind of investigated, and then I took this model of dramaturgy and kind of juxtaposed it to the piece that we made, and then I kind of found similarities and differences in these two approaches. So then I continue with saying that we didn't read this stuff by Ana Dubljević because it was written a little bit later. So we didn't call it landscape dramaturgy, we called it tantric dramaturgy or tantra dramaturgy. So I can read this. Should I read it in English, or is it fine in English? Yeah. Tantric dramaturgy. We sometimes called it tantra dramaturgy. While I was immersed in the process of making of Still to Come, I understood this term as an allegory that aims to describe the dramaturgy of the piece that we were making, stage dramaturgy that does not go for an introduction, peak, and resolution, but one that thrives on tantric heights, seemingly endless ride through hills and valleys, and produces a long-lasting and different kind of pleasuring and orgasming than the one the come shot offers us. It was organic and logical choice to engage in that kind of dramaturgy when making the performance based on researching the influences that feminist pornography may have on thinking and making choreography. But today, I can understand tantric dramaturgy as a term that aims to describe also the dramaturgy of the entire process, namely dramaturgical thinking of the feminist pornscape practice. Tantric dramaturgy describes almost a kind of spiritual approach to dramaturgy as a practice. The one where we, in the process of, in brackets, love, making, forget about the orgasm. Here, as a metaphor for forgetting about the end product of the process. Process is not about reaching a goal, as challenging as it can be to delete that well-known and scripted ending from our systems. The process is about practicing the practice, and the performance is one possible snapshot of it. The goal is to enjoy and be eager about the exploration of every moment of the process, even and especially when confusion and obstacles come in. Practicing of being present with each other, trustfully surrendering, as an active verb, to whatever wanted or unwanted comes up, whether it be joyful understanding, uncomfortable conflicts, or deep vulnerabilities, regularly communicating with each other about how we feel, like through check-in circle at the beginning of each rehearsal, nourishing the compassionate environment, openly taking space, asking and acting upon our own individual needs and wants, listening, being ready to be of service to the other, giving time for things to appear, knowing when things are dead and be okay with letting them go, giving the needed space for any anger, shame, or awkwardness that might appear, celebrating and empowering ourselves and each other to reach our full expressions, however weird, crazy, or ungraspable they might be, and having fun with it. Tantric dramaturgy is a process that needs to become a practice of long-term deep connection with ourselves, each other, our art, and the context that surrounds it. It does not come easy, and is not a fixed once when it is reached. It has to be discovered again and again because we are conditioned from society, economy, and the art world itself to perform the opposite. This practice requires self-awareness and self-work, but always and only in relation to others. These were and are the aims of our practice, but they were not always accomplished. The thing to start from and always go back to is that we do not know how to do this, and we may never will. Nonetheless, whenever it is reached, this practice brings such vivid liveness, enjoyment, empowerment, and makes space for unimaginable to appear. And one crucial thing is that all this that makes this practice is not there to be romanticized, but politicized.
Which is also a great introduction to the topic of pornography itself and how it became one of the central concepts of the book. I'd like you to talk about how important it was for your thinking about feminist dramaturgy to engage with feminist pornography, and why it was as formative as it was. And also, do you feel that there are limits or limitations to the connective tissue between pornscaping and feminist dramaturgy? Like what is gained and what is possibly lost, if anything?
I cannot say if it's crucial, really. I must say that I have, in my artistic line of interest, I have been always interested in erotics, actually. So, or the lack of sexuality in the body present in dance and choreography, at least upon until some time, I guess. So my topics have been kind of related to this kind of thinking. I have, before Still to Come, I made a choreo eroticon with Marko Milic in Belgrade, and then after Still to Come, I have been also working on silliness or different stuff related to erotic body, and then now I also feel that I'm gonna actually try to put erotics on stage and see how to do it, like everyday erotics, not kind of a spectacle, I think there's a lot of kind of, which I appreciate a lot, kind of like queer spectacle on stage nowadays, but I would really like to go to kind of a subtle erotics of slowing down the time or making time for this. Anyhow, I went somewhere else. So feminist pornography was, I think, one of the entrances entrances towards this interest of mine. And it was, I mean, I think erotics is something that I really missed also, because in this kind of like, in the field there was a lot about this let's say non-peak or landscape dramaturgy, and but there was some kind of and it's still there, and I appreciate this practice a lot, but I have a feeling that especially going towards anthropocentric turn, that there is a lot of distancing or like impersonality there is something that I appreciate, but it's not my own choice of dealing or proposing the world. I do miss the flesh and the desire, and if we talk from the feminist point, of course, the female desire and the queer desire, but also in the dramaturgy itself and the embodiment of the, when I say dramaturgical thinking, I almost always now say dramaturgical thinking, feeling or thinking, sensing, because I have a need to get off of this wave of understanding dramaturgical work as something very kind of rational, cerebral, mental, which I appreciate a lot, and I would just add more senses to it and add the embodiment of the person, if there is a dramaturg or collective dramaturgical thinking where you can also sense through the decisions or make them aware, but from a different knowledge somehow, from a different point in the body, understanding what kind of like a setup of the audience could be, I don't know, or something like that. So I don't know if this is this was not the answer to your question.
No, but I am interested in how you made the shift from erotics to... I am very interested in Pia's comments about this line of argument, but I would like to just try to understand what was gained by the shift to calling it pornography or pornscapes, porno choreography. Like, why wasn't it just erotics? Why didn't it stay choreoerotics? What did you gain from dipping
I don't
into
know when
feminist
you put it like
pornography.
that. From this point in time, I would definitely agree. I mean, I did write in the book, we named this thing that we were kind of missing in the dance in these days. We were calling it pornishness. I guess there was something. So as a research trip, we went to a Berlin porn festival for 5-7 days, and we were just watching different kind of porn there, and it was an exceptional experience, I must say. So there was, I mean, we started from that research of feminist porn, bringing a different perspective, different more, even putting carving space for more erotic in the movie, anyhow. So what we gained, maybe I would call it differently today, I don't know, but that was a task for still to come, so let's see what comes later.
Pia?
No, I just also really find it interesting that you went to pornography to search for your answers, but I think that somehow I can understand that, because these are really the basics, let's say. It's really clear, you know. The gaze is clear, and you can really see it in its most profound, essential way. Yeah. So I think that, I can understand that, and of course, if you want to then also search for the women pleasure and the pleasure of looking and the pleasure of the performer on stage being watched, and this scopophilic way that the male gaze is watching, and how to develop different kinds of ways we can do that. I think that it's better to call it pornography or pornscapes or feminist pornography than to call it erotics, because I think that it has another connotation. It's more about sensuality and so on. And I think that here you really wanted to go into the basics of this watching position, of the pleasure position, of the dominance position, and so on. So I think that, I just a comment, that. All true. Yeah.
But also, Pia, you've written about you've also gone back to the concept of the female gaze and the potentials of using the motive or the structures or the strategies, or looking at pornography from like a different kind of position. Can you talk about that a bit?
So I think that I also started with Malvi, who came up with this term female gaze in opposition to the male gaze, and it's really a psychoanalytic text, and it was also a way of, for me it was a way how to distance myself from psychoanalysis as a way, kind of, a way that was really dominant way in our context with the psychoanalytical Lacanian school and so on. So how can we maybe free ourselves from that? So I was reading then a lot of theoreticians that talk about, I don't know, haptic gaze, which is a gaze that it's again more on the side of the feminist, not the feminine, but the feminist, which is not again about how things are clear on the picture, you know, but how this sensuality is. We're talking about cinema now because Malvi was talking about cinema. How also there maybe some tantric stuff are going on, you know, how maybe the haptic gaze also on the side of the viewer can happen, so that it's not only this visuality that has this distance is inserted into our watching, but how can we maybe use our eyes as something more corporal, something more tactile, something more kinesthetic, and how this can be then a way of watching like this feminist gaze or female gaze, as Malvi calls it. So I think that there's a lot of potential in that. I wanted to then in this article really research these Deleuzian critics of the psychoanalysis, which I think that are really nicely then developed through this kind of feminist, sensual ways of watching that are different to those of the male gaze in the Lacanian psychoanalysis, which was a long time the only matrix of watching or for analysis of film and so on. So I think that here some really important stuff in these basics, can happen. So it's going back to the roots of, okay, so is this really, is the watching really just this scopophilic gaze, or can we find some other ways and pleasures in it, which are pleasures of the viewer, pleasures of the performer, pleasure of, I don't know, something in between, yeah.
It seems somehow that a lot of us seem to be craving sensuality. I feel like all over the place we're talking about bodies and sensuality and how to come back to the body, how to come back to erotics, how to find erotics somewhere out of the spectacle, as Ana said. But I'm also interested, given, Pia, your background in dramaturgy, but also your work as a theorist and an editor, and we've mentioned new modes of writing and trying to develop some kind of tantric writing or non-peak writing or auto theory or embodied protocols of writing. What is your experience engaging with these texts, and have you been developing your own writing practice to maybe incorporate some of these shifts?
Well, I think this is a whole new topic we can start to discuss because this is why Maska for me was such a nice platform, because I had troubles also with academic writing, and I also wanted really to the practice interested me always, and these magazines together with Frakcija and Teorija koje hoda, which are not issuing anymore, I think they were beginning to find something there, but of course, it's not so easy to have this continuation of the research of how to write differently, of how to also write in a, I don't know, feminist manner or in a more haptic manner, whatever. I think that for this also a lot of time is needed, a lot of resources which are not always there in our precarious lives. So I can't say that in my now 3 years of editing or 4 years of editing Maska that I've seen a lot of cases like this, even though it is something that of course we want to encourage, and this is why it's so nice for me when I see texts that derive from practice and texts that don't stick to the academic ways of writing, which is somehow a model of everything that can be written in theory, and we're so used to this model. So in the next Maska, I think that also Ana Fazekaš has a really nice case of such writing, I think, that is really exploring something else. I don't know, but of course we publish a lot of articles which are conventional in form because also of the pragmatism, because it's really hard to say, okay, please deliver an article that's like really experimental. You have 2 months, and okay, it's of course a practice that needs time and conditions to be produced, and also a lot of time together with practice, and also the practitioners need time. You said that you needed also this special out of your usual way of doing time in your masters to do it. So there are a lot of questions here, but it's exactly what we try to strive for. I don't know. It's something really important to me as an editor. Mm.
So I was lucky. I didn't have a burden of. I'm just thinking that I was so lucky with writing this because I didn't carry a burden of having to think about how something should be written somehow. I was just like, yeah, we had so many different influences inside of the piece. We wanted to just juxtapose a scene that comes from a performance art and then have a musical thinking, dancing, and then we want to go into contemporary dance, and then we all mashed it up together because there was this kind of like, we want to see how this works out in with the multiplicity of approaches. And I was like, yeah, okay, so I have these topics and each of them really requires a different style of writing, so I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna put it there. So yeah, I was lucky with not knowing that how this experimental is.
Yes, well, the text has an ease to it, like a lightness. I would like to go on still. Yes, it's a tantric kind of book launch. No, I would like to first ask Ana to maybe talk about the working group that's taken place for the past few days, and then I'd like to open the floor for the audience to comment and share experiences. I would really love to hear from the people who were at the working group and what they felt, what they've learned. Also, those who pose questions get a free copy of the book. Seriously. So you think about your contributions. I'd like Ana to just say a few words about the working group, and I'd like to point out how interesting it is that the organizers, Nina and Ana, Božahana and Nina, along with Ana, organize this working group, thinking also about how to make it more feminist, more egalitarian, more like something done together than someone coming from the outside to teach someone else a specific sort of practice. Go.
Yeah, I won't talk too much. I really want to hear if there's some willingness to say some experiences, but I really just want to say that I'm super surprised in a most positive way about how this whole thing worked out. We did 2 days for 4 hours with a break, and I did have many questions of how to actually work with the book, because it covers different topics, it's fragmentary, there was an interest to read together and then discuss, and whether I had questions whether this is going to be too kind of elusive and too kind of going into this discussive mode but not really getting anywhere. But it was really a great experience because I got lucky to have participants that were coming from such a different, so many different fields. I was actually, to say expectations, I was really thinking that there will be only dance field and performing arts field people, but there were, I don't know, comparative literature, philosophy, queer studies, so many different backgrounds, and it got me understanding how such a topic can be also interesting for different fields. And then it got me understanding how not that this is not a closed small niche of an interest. This is actually something that we are in different fields actually working with and through, which is amazing. And yeah, and I love this idea that we don't make a workshop, that we make a like a working group. And I also wanted to challenge it a little bit. I didn't want to just name it a working group. I thought that it's really good to also try to question this. So I'm coming with a book, and I read it. I wrote it, fine. But like, how can I also, because yeah, I mentioned this at the reading group when I was about to sign this book. I really felt awkward because it's not. There is so many people that wrote this book. And I realized after and during the research with so many people and so many artists and so many theoreticians that everybody's really coming towards this topic from their very personal, specific practices. And then I really wanted to open up the field for the participants in the workshop to also share how they think and feel about it and what their experiences and problematics around it is. And I think we really did a good job in this in these 2 days. So thank you a lot again. I don't know if there's any.
So you're up. Would anyone like to share what you've done with Ana for the past few days, maybe? How did it feel? You get a free book. This is weird, yeah. Da, možete na bilo kojem, mislim na bilo kojem. Mislim, dobro, probajmo na bilo kojem jeziku, okej. Okay, ko je bio na toj radnoj grupi? Okej.
Pa dajte, ajde, pričali smo svi sam, ja.
Može?
Na hrvatskom ću, nisam niš pripremila. Ja sam očekivala radionicu, ali sam dobila radnu grupu, što me jako iznenadilo i bilo mi jako drago što je Ana sve o čemu priča u knjizi primijenila na našu radnu grupu i mi smo stvarno radile tantrički, feministički i bilo je predivno i naučila sam puno i još mi je draže što sam upoznala, vidiš, sve te predivne osobe s kojima sam sudjelovala. Jedva čekam da vidim šta će one dalje napraviti i šta ćemo dalje napraviti skupa i gdje ćemo se još sretati. I jako želim vidjeti ovu erotiku koju ću staviti na scenu, tako da nadam se da će doći u Zagreb ili ja u Beograd za njom. Da. Hvala puno.
Još? Šta ste radili? Mene užasno zanima šta ste radili.
Znači, jedna stvar koju smo radili na početku drugog dana je bilo to pitanje kako se osjećamo. I ti si postavila pitanje šta je s onim ljudima koji možda se ne osjećaju spremni podijeliti kako se osjećaju. I bila je jedna osoba u toj sobi koja se nije osjećala ugodno podijeliti ili imati tako nekakvo invazivno pitanje i možda čak i par osoba. I mislim da je Ana stvorila jedan stvarno lijep prostor u kojem je to bilo dopušteno i ne samo u tom trenutku nego kroz cijeli taj dan ne podijeliti kako se osjećamo. A s druge strane, oni koji su htjeli to dijeliti su bili stvarno vođeni u smjeru da dijele kako se osjećaju tjelesno, jer često kada nas pitaju kako se osjećamo, krećemo u neku analizu zašto se osjećamo na određeni način i Ana se cijelo vrijeme vraćala na pitanje ali što osjećaš, gdje, emociju, da imenuje emociju u tijelu koja opisuje taj osjećaj i to je zapravo, iako nas je dosta bilo plesača ili osoba koje se bave tijelom i pokretom, ja sam barem shvatila koliko je zapravo teško, koliko smo kondicionirani zapravo ne prepoznati te tjelesne osjećaje, tako da je to bio jedan moment.
Anything for a book. Ok, da, sve što su cure rekle i baš to da Ana, na način na koji ti pišeš, na koji način se stvari rastvaraju u knjizi, tako je bilo i u radnoj skupini, tako da je to bila ono jako lijepo za osjetiti, jer sam počela čitati knjigu, znači za radnu skupinu, pa imam neko iskustvo tog čitanja i kako mi je bilo čitajući knjigu, tako mi je bilo i u radnoj skupini. To mi je jako vrijedno iskustvo. Da, meni je recimo bilo jako vrijedno to što, recimo, ne znam ko je rekao da mi jako puno pričamo kad radimo svakakve prakse i radove i kao puno diskutiramo, ali to ima isto neku svoju težinu zato što je užasno fokusirano, koliko god da može ići u širinu i slojevitost, ali jako fokusirano, ima neku težinu, neki teret u sebi, a mene je onda iz tog mog iskustva jako veselo biti ovako nečemu, što možda je vama nekima koji se jako puno bavite teorijom pak drugačije, znači dolazimo iz nekih drugih praksi, pa mi je to bilo jako vrijedno iskustvo koliko je bilo diskurzivno, koliko je bilo stvarno čitalačka grupa koja onda razgovara o svemu, a onda opet kao u knjizi toliko stvari meni iskustveno su bile i utjelovljene u razgovoru i bilo mi je recimo jako drago čitajući knjigu pa onda i razgovarajući. Meni su brojne bombe kad čitaš stvari koje su užasno napunjene svakakvim značenjem, i onda dogodi se takva slojevitost u mikrosekundi da ne znaš šta ćeš s tim, a opet smo nekako jako to podržale u prostoru da nije ostalo kao površno sklizavanje ili neke samo brushing, nego je stvarno nešto zaživjelo, nešto se prodiskutiralo, makar smo ti ja pričali isto o eluzivnosti, koliko je stvari ostalo je puno toga eluzivno, jer mislim da možda ni ne može biti drugačije, a možda je to i u našoj sferi super, jer naša sfera nije toliko argumentativna, nego može biti neshvatljivog, što je super za iskusiti. Tako da, hvala Ani i svima drugima.
Dalje? Ljudi koji nisu bili na radnoj skupini i požalili su.
Ja imam knjigu pa ću donirati. Pa meni je sad zapravo sinulo kad su cure pričale i taj check-in, sjećam se i kad sam čitala i na toj promociji u Beogradu, na kojoj nismo onda mogli razgovarati, ali zanima me zapravo koliko ti je, to su sve neke stvari koje ja znam puno više iz terapijskog zapravo konteksta, grupnog terapijskog konteksta, pa me zanima da li ti je to bila ikakva referenca, ideja, nešto s čim...
Pa ne. Mislim, niti sam ja sama izmislila tu praksu, to je došlo od Fride Laux u projekat i nekako ostalo i čini mi se da ja volim to da praktikujem. Ne, meni je to veza baš feministička, baš mi je iz afektivnog, to isto kao uzimanja prostor za emocije unutar procesa, davanje značaja prostoru emocije i afekata kao validnom prostoru za rad. Ništa drugo, ne terapeutski. Zato što ovaj krug ne ide...
Ne mislim u tom smislu, nego ja vidim vezu s terapijom, ne mislim ni u kvalitativnom smislu, ali mi je zanimljivo da se otvaraju ti prostori u radnim procesima, jer to mi se veže, mislim, na sve o čemu ste pričali, znači proces rada, konsent i tako dalje, sve to vidim kao neke dodirne točke, taj konsent isto da pričamo o tim stvarima, ne? Mislim, koji je užasno bitan da se događa. I taj space da to nije opet diktat, jer mislim da se to lako može pretvoriti u američki pritisak kao sad svi moramo oversharati i tako dalje, nego upravo to da imaš space da doneseš ili ne doneseš i da je oboje okej.
Odrekla si se knjige. Dalje. Možete pitati ako ima nešto što smo spomenule, a voljeli bi da se vratimo na to ili naprosto nešto što vam je zatitralo, možda hoćete čuti nešto više o tome ili ovo vam se uopće nije svidjelo i hoćete izraziti svoje nezadovoljstvo. Mislim, prozivat ću vas. Nemamo više... Dobro. Mislim, ok, možemo, ovo stvarno isto nije idealan setting za temu o egalitarnosti, dijeljenju i tako dalje, pa možemo privesti ovaj razgovor u svom službenoj varijanti kraju. Pia je isto donijela Voice of Dance nekoliko primjeraka, pa ju možete probati nagovoriti da vam ih da. Ja sam jako sretna što sam imala priliku pričati s Pijom i Anom večeras o toj knjizi koja mi je jako draga i jako dobra. Tako da isto možete utrkivati za ove zadnje dvije.
Da, ja moram samo da kažem da nije više bilo primjera kada se donese iz Beograda, to je jedino, ali svi koji žele mogu dobiti PDF knjige i možete ga deliti, postoji srpska i engleska verzija. Kako ćemo to organizirati?
I izvršiti pritisak na izdavače da se izda drugo izdanje jer je potrebno i molim isto reference za neke domaće izdavače koji bi to izdali u Hrvatskoj.
Hvala.
Kad su već tu.
Što da nešto
jer,
ne?
Da. Zašto ne? Stvarno je važna knjiga i trebala bi zapravo biti jedna u nizu knjiga tog profila.
Ću bacati ovako. Ne, pa da. Postoji PDF, ako ste u bilo kom kontaktu sa Ninom i Hanom, možemo tako, ili je akademija.edu, Ana Dubljević, Feminist Pornscapes, lalala. Hvala vam što ste došli.
Da, hvala.
Hvala.